Motorola Mobility was separated from Motorola Solutions in January 2011, keeping the consumer mobile device business and the extensive patent portfolio that had established Motorola as foundational to the mobile telephone industry. In August 2011, Google announced its acquisition of Motorola Mobility for approximately $12.5 billion. The deal was immediately recognized as primarily a patent acquisition. Google's Android operating system faced mounting patent litigation from Apple and other competitors. Motorola Mobility's roughly 17,000 patents, many essential to core mobile communication standards, offered the precise legal protection Google needed to defend its ecosystem. As part of acquiring the complete operating company rather than isolating the patent portfolio, Google also obtained the Motorola Schaumburg campus, a sprawling headquarters complex in suburban Chicago. Google needed the patents urgently. The corporate campus came bundled with them as an unintended consequence of the most legally efficient transaction structure. In January 2014, Google sold Motorola Mobility to Lenovo for approximately $2.91 billion. It retained the majority of the patents while divesting the operating business, including the Schaumburg campus, an asset Google had never planned to manage long-term. The forensic insight: accidental corporate real estate acquisition. This case illustrates a classic accidental corporate real estate acquisition. For about 2.5 years, Google owned one of the largest suburban corporate campuses in the Chicago metropolitan area, purely as a side effect of securing a critical patent portfolio. The campus was never strategically aligned with Google's needs. The patents were. Yet the transaction structure that efficiently delivered the intellectual property also delivered a physical asset that Google's operational model could not effectively utilize. The forensic entry point lies at the intersection of patent acquisition strategy and corporate campus real estate. Among documented cases, the Motorola Mobility transaction stands out as one of the most precisely recorded instances where a major technology company's deliberate strategic move produced an unintended real estate outcome valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The patents were worth the $12.5 billion headline price. The campus, by contrast, was worth considerably less to Google, which recognized this immediately upon closing. What Google could not precisely determine was the campus's value to other potential buyers, an appraisal question central to this analysis. The campus arrived with the deal. Extracting it required an entirely separate transaction. Operational and cultural mismatch. During Google's ownership, the Schaumburg campus presented a specific corporate real estate management challenge for which Google's model and culture were ill-suited. Google's 2011 real estate strategy centered on distinctive, amenity-rich campuses designed for collaborative open workspaces and the innovative culture synonymous with its brand. In contrast, the Motorola Schaumburg campus was purpose-built for a hardware manufacturing and engineering company. Its layout reflected traditional functional requirements for device design, testing, and production, rather than the fluid, creativity-focused environment Google cultivated. As a result, Google's operational use of the site remained limited and never integrated into its core activities. The campus's design, suburban location, and configuration simply did not align with Google's workplace strategy. Lenovo, however, as a consumer electronics and mobile device manufacturer, found greater operational compatibility with the campus's configuration. This acquirer-specific value difference highlights a fundamental challenge in corporate real estate appraisal. The worth of purpose-built campuses depends heavily on how well the asset matches the buyer's specific operational needs. Institutional denial and planning failures. The institutional shortcoming here differs from other patterns of denial seen in trophy assets or over-leveraged deals. It was not a miscalibration of debt, but a denial of scope, a failure to fully anticipate and plan for the real estate consequences of an acquisition whose primary purpose was intellectual property. Google's acquisition planning was sophisticated and extensively documented in regulatory filings, financial analyses, and press coverage. The patent rationale, competitive implications, and financial terms received rigorous scrutiny. Yet the Schaumburg campus's disposition strategy received far less attention. Because the campus was incidental to the patent goal, its management was treated as a mere administrative byproduct rather than a strategic issue requiring equivalent rigor. This deprioritization was significant. Managing a major campus asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars for 2.5 years demanded explicit pre-transaction planning, but the patent-focused lens relegated it to secondary status. The result was an underplanned disposition process. The broader lesson extends beyond this single deal. Transactions centered on intellectual property that require acquiring an entire operating company will consistently underplan for the physical assets acquired as byproducts. Every such patent portfolio deal carries this structural risk. The Motorola case's scale and visibility make it a particularly clear example, but the pattern is inherent to the transaction form, disposition and legacy. Google ultimately resolved the situation through the Lenovo sale. The $2.91 billion transaction implied a net patent acquisition cost of roughly $959 billion, with the Schaumburg campus transferred as part of the operating business rather than valued separately. Public records do not isolate the campus's exact contribution to the sale price, creating a documentation gap that any appraisal must acknowledge. Lenovo, a Chinese technology company expanding its American operations, assumed management of the suburban Chicago facility. This introduced new complexities tied to Lenovo's evolving U.S. market strategy. In the wider context of corporate real estate failures, this case documents a distinct category, the accidental campus acquisition driven by patent strategy. Unlike cases where a bankrupt company's purpose-built campus loses value due to the original occupant's failure, as seen in the WorldCom campus case, here the asset found renewed utility through a buyer whose needs better matched its configuration. It was not a forced fire sale, but a strategic handoff that required separate attention the original deal had not fully anticipated. The patents justified the $12.5 billion investment. The campus came along for the ride. Its disposition was managed as part of a larger deal, though its precise value contribution remains undisclosed. Key takeaways and open questions. This episode reveals how even sophisticated acquirers can overlook the real estate implications of intellectual property deals. Treating major physical assets as secondary byproducts carries tangible costs in management, opportunity, and suboptimal outcomes. If this case file shifts how you view the real estate consequences of patent and technology acquisitions, consider subscribing. Future episodes explore similarly unintended outcomes, including a resort case with comparable complexities. Given Google's documented 2.5-year ownership of the Schaumburg campus as an acquisition byproduct, what specific pre-transaction planning mechanisms would best ensure adequate corporate real estate disposition strategies for patent portfolio deals that necessitate operating company acquisitions? This content was developed using artificial intelligence tools as part of the research, writing, and production process. All AI-generated material was subject to human review, editorial intervention, and approval before publication.